Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Ali Ingersoll. Most of us have experienced this, driving down the road at night when suddenly you're blinded by a car coming the opposite direction. Adaptive driving beam headlights were designed to prevent this from happening, but Five on Your Side's producer, Pritchard Strong, has found that they're not active here. Thanks so much for joining me today, Pritch, to talk about this. So let's start off with explaining exactly what adaptive driving beam headlights are.
Yeah, so I mean, they're pretty cool. Basically, if you think about a TV screen or a projector, those LED lights, how they can project different images, different brightnesses, things like that. Well, just think about that scaled up in the use of headlights. So they're projecting light out onto the road, but only in certain places where you need it. So if there's a car coming the other way, that's going to be able to maybe cast a shadow on that car as it's driving by, so they're not getting the glare from your headlights. Meanwhile, you're getting full beam light in other places where you need it, the road in front of you, off to the side so that you can see pedestrians. So really it's a benefit to both drivers when it's operating and effective.
And really anyone who's sharing the road with you, like you said, pedestrians, cyclists, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, yep.
So you talked with someone for this story named Mark Smith. He's from Wake Tech. Tell me a little about him.
He's with their automotive center, very knowledgeable on this whole thing, and gave us some different perspective on it that, we've done a ton of research going into the story and gave us even more perspective about these headlights and some of the issues with bringing them here and the changes that it means for shops. But I mean, he's really the full scale of automotive knowledge. I feel like you could just ask that guy anything. He's going to know it for you.
What exactly did he say about how this technology works?
So it's pretty neat. Like we said, kind of like a projector. It can focus light where you need it, reduce it where you don't. And essentially it comes down to, how a lot of the cars now have cameras or sensors that are kind of up near your rear view mirror heading out the windshield. He said that's kind of where it is centered. There's sensors up there that monitor the road. They take that information in, and these headlights use an array of LED lights that essentially some of them are on, some of them are off, and they're putting light exactly where you need it.
So it's working by a sensor then. It's not you and me driving down the street. I notice someone's coming. Like the way you do with your brights or your high beams, right? Like you have to flick those on. This is not that. This does it all on its own.
Right. And it's important to note, because that's a good point, because there are automatic high beams right now, right? So if you have automatic high beams on your car, you flick your high beams on and your car is going to sense when another car is coming or another car is in front of you. It's going to lower them down to regular beams. This is more advanced than that. Automatic high beams are separate. ADB headlights are the next step up in that evolution.
Okay, great. I appreciate that distinction there. Are there any other places already using this technology?
So Europe has had it since about 2012. Mark Smith was telling me Japan has used it for years as well. But yeah, in Europe, they've been using this for a while. They've had standards for it, and it seems that it's been working well there. For the better part of 12 years now.
Yeah, definitely. That is quite a while. What made you interested in wanting to look into this story?
So we actually, talking to a WRAL employee recently, and a couple of times talking with her, she, just mentioned that it's so blinding in the road sometimes, just driving at night when you've got bigger cars. This is a problem with bigger trucks, bigger SUVs, where their lights are set up high and you're down low, you're getting the full effect of those LEDs and how bright they are, much brighter than the halogen bulbs of 20 years ago. And really just saying how much of a problem it was. And, why isn't there a solution for this? You would think that they'd come up with something. Well, they did come up with something, as we found out. It's just not necessarily on our roads yet.
I think it's so interesting that this falls under the Five on Your Side brand, because it really is a consumer product or a consumer problem, since we are the ones buying cars, we're the ones driving cars and stuff like that.
And feeling the effects of lights that, are unintentionally too bright sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those situations, too, where you get a question and it's like, why is this happening? And you're like, oh, why is that happening? So I guess, what did you learn from doing this story?
With this, there's a ton of technology that's out there that just isn't utilized. And, in talking with Mark Smith at Wake Tech, I asked him directly, I said, look, with these headlights, as they exist in Europe, put on our roads today, would they improve safety? And without hesitation, he said yes. So again, it's one of those technologies that's out there. It exists. It's something that we could be using right now. And there are reasons that we're not, that we'll get into. But right now, we just don't have the benefit of this technology on American roads.
After this break, we will get into that. Welcome back. So as we were saying before the break, no cars on our roads are using ADB. And Pritch, why not?
Essentially, it comes down to the regulation, the rules that were set by NHTSA, National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. They made rules, final rules for this back in 2022. And essentially, they have a bunch of measurable metrics, specifics, things that need to be met in order for these lights to go on the road. And basically, the big difference is in Europe, some of the testing is subjective. So you have engineers who are doing test drives on the road, and they're determining whether the brightness that they're seeing from these ADB headlights is appropriate or if they need to be retooled. And essentially, NHTSA said, no, that's just not for us. We need these measurable standards that, car manufacturers can meet before they put these products on the road.
Was there pushback to them putting this requirement out there?
There was, and really it was from the beginning. Within a few weeks of this final rule being put out by NHTSA, there were several groups, one of which we emailed with and got a statement from, but essentially they had some issues with the specifications. And what they were saying is some of them conflict with each other, making it almost practically impossible to do. You just couldn't get certain things to meet standard A and then the same headlight to meet standard B as well. It just wasn't possible. And there were other things that they highlighted that would make ADB highlights more affordable, bring them to the market sooner. NHTSA took those suggestions under consideration. And 2 years later, they are still considering them. We did ask NHTSA about that. They have not made any determination on any of the recommendations that they've gotten from auto manufacturers, auto groups. They say that they are still looking and considering those.
So as they're considering that, and just thinking about cars themselves, you talked about these are already on the roads in places like Europe and in Japan. So would they have to be installed into cars here? Or I know that a lot of cars are manufactured in those countries, right? So do cars on our roads already have this technology in place?
Cars on our roads do have this technology in place. It's just not active. And at this point, it's hard to say whether those cars would just be able to get like a software upgrade and then they'd be good to go, or if there would have to actually be physical changes to a headlight or car to make it meet these NHTSA standards. But yeah, there are plenty of cars on our roads that have this technology built in. Audi is a major producer of this technology. They've got some really cool videos about how this works online. So yeah, it's definitely around. It's just not on.
Talking about cool videos, I really like this story with all the AR graphics that we did. I thought that we showcased it so well so that someone could see how it works, because it really was like kind of broken into thirds and sides. So you could talk about that range of where the lights would go. That was really well done.
And really, it gets even more specific than that, right? This can carve out all sorts of very fine shapes to make sure that you're not giving glare to other vehicles, while again, still seeing all parts of the road, side, in front of you, all the way.
So one of the things you said that Mark Smith said is that one of the benefits is how safe our streets would automatically be. What other cost and benefits are there?
So there's a big cost just in the LED lights in general. We talk about, I kind of mentioned the halogen bulbs of 20 years ago, and I was talking with him about how expensive car headlights are now compared to back then. You could be talking about anywhere from $50 to a couple of $100 for a headlight back in the day. Now you're talking about almost up to $2,000 per headlight on some of today's LED headlights, just because of the technology and the LEDs and everything that goes into them. But also remember, back in the day, you were replacing halogen bulbs more frequently. LEDs should outlast the life of the car. So you should never have to change them as long as you don't get in an accident or anything like that. So that's there's a cost, there's a benefit there. There's also a big cost to shops, auto body shops who, in North Carolina, you have to have your headlights aligned. And these especially would be important to have aligned. And the testing equipment that would come with the rules NHTSA set, that could be tens of thousands of dollars in upgrades to existing technology that shops may or may not already have. But you'd have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to get the appropriate equipment to be able to align and measure these headlights. And that's a huge cost burden for a lot of smaller shops. It may be inaccessible for them. It may just not be something they're able to deal with.
It's interesting that Wake Tech is teaching people about this technology, though, I guess preparing for exactly what is going to happen, what could possibly happen. Do we know if there's a timeline for when we could start seeing this technology in use?
It's hard to say. Again, NHTSA says that they're reviewing some of the recommendations, but really they haven't made any changes, and there's concern about how difficult these are to make. So can they come to market as the rules are set? It sounds like, yes, they can. It's just going to take time, but we really don't have a time frame at this point. In the meantime, if those headlights are bothering you at night, one of the things that our partners at Consumer Reports have suggested in their research on this subject is looking down and to the right when a car is coming on at you with bright headlights. That way you're able to keep your eyes on that outer lane line and follow the road while avoiding some of that glare from the car that's oncoming. So that's a good tip. Others that are less proven, there are nighttime driving glasses and things like that. We don't have any recommendation on those. There's just not enough research on that to really say. But, people have tried them. Some people like them. Some people don't. But that down and away, that's a good tip, good way to go if you're confronted with those bright lights.
That is a great tip. Thank you so much, Pritch, for joining me, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. If you listen to this podcast on WRAL.com or the WRAL News app, you can also find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow the show so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.